Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe.
Imagine you're faced with the possibility of losing your children due to a positive drug test, but you've never done drugs. I mean, this is the saga that Sierra Cummings has been covering here in the state of Georgia. Welcome to Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. I'm Anastasia, almost joined by Sierra Cummings, and this story is one of many, but this story is just, every single one is so hard to believe, Sierra.
Yeah, this story is a part of a larger series called Stolen Sobriety, and as that name implies, these are typically parents that admit to their past addiction, and they tell us, I'm recovering, I've done the work to recover, and every time I get a drug screen by the state, well, not every time, some of the time when I get a drug screen by the state, it comes back positive, but I know I've been sober this entire time. What makes this particular story different is this is a mom who says she has never done drugs. In fact, she's a local paramedic who works 12-hour days. She does 2 days on, and I believe it's 1 day off. So her job, just that intensity of the job, she's also chosen not to even drink. So she's like, I've never done drugs. I also don't really drink during the week, and these test results could not be accurate. So it's a really tricky story because it seems so obvious, but when you have documentation against you, it feels like an uphill battle. So I want you to watch and listen to Elisa's story, and then we'll come out of it and talk about what's changed since. This is no laughing matter for Lisa Trantham, but laughing
it was really bad.
Is how she gets through telling the story, one where she's accused of being on drugs. It started in 2024 when Elisa's 7-year-old daughter had severe bladder troubles.
She had gastric issues. I had been through 3 specialists. Each one of them had the same treatment that was not working, and she was getting worse.
These x-rays show the problem. This area of her abdomen should be empty. Instead, a huge blockage.
It was like the size of a baby's head. There's no way it was coming out.
It led to irregular and uncontrollable bowel movements.
She had soiling, so I was like, I'm not risking the bullying. I'm not risking other kids finding out.
Elisa kept her daughter home, telling a school official they're stopping the medicine as well. That's when staff reported Elisa to the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services. Defects, she alleges.
Stopping that treatment was to actually figure out one that would really solve your daughter's problem.
Yes.
But instead, you end up having more problems from the state.
Yes, and every time I tried that treatment, she was in pain, she was crying. She still wouldn't even use the bathroom for days and days.
Elisa understands why she was reported to child welfare because school workers are among Georgia's mandated reporters, employees and officials legally required to report suspected abuse or neglect. Elisa would know, a mandated reporter herself as a local paramedic.
I've always been the caller. I've never been the one called on, you know. I do work with a lot of behavioral health transports as far as suicidal, detoxing from substance abuse. Get a lot of children in this system as well.
So when defects workers came over to inspect the house and collected hair samples from Elisa's head for a hair follicle drug screen,
so I just kind of do it in the back.
The trained paramedic was not surprised, but the results left her stunned. Positive for multiple drugs, including methamphetamine.
I was shocked, and then I just started crying. I didn't know what to do. I was really shocked.
A veteran paramedic celebrated and awarded for saving lives, now threatened by accusations of endangering the lives of her children. In fact, a DFACS worker wrote in case notes, there's a safety threat with concerns of substance abuse, saying Elisa must have 24/7 supervision when around her 2 minor children, adding Elisa must comply with 2 weekly random drug screens.
Do you use drugs?
No, no. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and I definitely don't use drugs.
But she is on these doctor-prescribed heart rate and ADHD medications. Trying to get to the bottom of the alleged false positive, she went digging.
The only reason why I knew is because I saw your other stories, and I was like, oh no.
Atlanta News First Investigates uncovered a troubled pattern of some labs subcontracted to do DFACS drug screens. Lawsuits, internal reviews, and complaints outline an unreliable system, the way some tests are performed, failing to distinguish between illicit drugs and legal medicine, and which drug concentration levels determine a true positive result. After our reporting, Georgia DFACS said it was beginning the process of an audit back in March. Since then, it remains unclear if that's happened. However, we obtained this memo the agency sent to its drug screen providers. All providers must immediately review whether current lab partners are certified by SAMHSA, the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or that they meet SAMHSA standards, including cutoff levels at initial testing and confirmation testing, meaning labs should do at least 2 tests to verify a positive, but also use certain calculations that measure how much of a drug is present in a sample, which in turn further confirms if there's actual illicit drug use. As for Elisa, she saw an expert toxicologist to review her case. His report validated her alleged false positives from DFACS labs were due to her medication. To cover all bases, at the advice of our other stories, she even began getting independent drug tests done, too.
And thank God for those articles, because immediately I was like, I'm gonna go get my own test every time they test me.
The independent results, negative. DFACS officially telling the mom July 3rd they've closed the case against her.
I don't talk about it, I just pretend like it never happened so that they can forget, And hopefully this will never happen again.
This case started in November and ended in July. That entire time, the kids were not placed into foster care. Their adult sister was their temporary guardian. Elisa's daughter is doing well on a new treatment for her gastric issues now. In the studio, I'm Sierra Cummings. Atlanta News First investigates.
Amazing reporting, such a heavy story. My one question is, did this mom actually lose custody of her children for any period of time?
So here's the thing. These 2 kids never entered Georgia DFACS custody. So they didn't have to go to a group home. They never entered foster care. Thankfully for this family, the 2 kids, they have an adult sister, and she was able to take temporary guardianship over the kids while this case was settled and while it was figured out. So the kids were allowed to remain in the home with their adult sister, and whenever mom was there, she had to have 24/7 supervision.
I saw you highlighted that in this story, and my heart sank because she allegedly has done nothing wrong, and to have to be supervised with your own child who you're in tears about because she's struggling with a health issue and you don't want her to be bullied, the whole thing is just so sad. And she saw your reporting.
She did.
And got the new test.
And we lean into it a little bit in our storytelling that part of the way that she copes is kind of like joking and making jokes.
Yeah,
so going back to that 24/7 supervision, she said she didn't want her kids to really know how distraught she was. Mm-hmm. So whenever she would be in the home interacting with her elementary kids and she'd see her adult daughter there, they would jokingly say, "Hey, supervisor." And so it was like moments like that where they were able to laugh it off.
Okay,
but
good.
really she was so heartbroken because she's like, I'm the mom. I'm the one that takes them to school. I'm the one that cooks them. I'm the one that cleans them. I'm the one that makes sure they go to their doctor's appointment. And so inside she was really hurting, and externally she just did her best to make things feel normal and very lighthearted with all of her kids. But yeah, to your point, she saw our reporting, and really she's a mandated reporter herself as a paramedic. So when she realized that the state was going to have to come in, look at the home, make sure there was food, running water, all these things, she wasn't defensive. She said she wasn't angry. She's like,
Take
you know
my
what, I
hair.
get it. Yeah. She's like, I get it. And you know what? I get it. You want to close out the case, you got to do a drug screen. I welcome you to do a drug screen. And so she does that, never thinking that anything would be opposite from the life that she says she lives every day. And so when she got those drug test results back, she had to dig. She went on the internet, she started reading a lot, and
you.
as you pointed out, that's when she saw some of our stolen sobriety stories. And she says she's so thankful that those stories existed, because had they not, she wouldn't have known what to do. She knew at the advice of our stories, I need to start getting independent tests. Anytime they test me, I'm going to go get an independent test. And then she took it a step further as one of our first stories that mentioned an expert toxicologist. She then went to go find an expert toxicologist who then reviewed her case, those levels for the drug screening, also reviewed her prescriptions, and because he's basically a scientist, he was able to do a third-party report saying, hey, this is actually her positive results for illicit drugs is actually consistent with prescribed
prescription medications,
Yeah.
which parents, this could be a fear for parents now to take what they're prescribed. I mean, it's very common for people to be on an antidepressant or something, or anxiety.
ADHD medication. Yeah, we know that like the rates in which people are diagnosed with ADHD has changed drastically since the pandemic. So that is a common diagnosis.
Yes.
People commonly take medication for ADHD, and so to know that like the results were saying she was on meth, she really, I mean,
Horrifying.
for her, it was heartbreaking, but also comical, and she's glad that the resolution is what it is today. And you heard at the very tail end of that story, she says, I try not to talk about it so that I can so that I can forget, and hopefully they can forget this time in our life too.
Oh, and yes, we wish that for them, but Sierra, oh my gosh, this is happening to families.
Yeah.
And you point out in your piece there that there's an internal email that you got.
So here's the thing. When we first started our reporting within the past year, at some point along the way, like around spring of this year, Georgia DFACS, Division of Family and Children Services, they said they were in the beginning stages to conduct an audit. So that was back in the spring. So naturally, as we do these stories, we keep following up with them. And at our last check, they didn't explicitly confirm that an audit was happening. And then we also did what we call open records requests, just seeking public documents that would indicate whether an audit is happening. And upon those requests, it didn't really yield any results that actually indicated, yes, we can confirm that an audit is actually happening. But in our search for those documents, that's when we learned about the memo. And this was a memo that the state, Georgia DFACS is under the umbrella of the Georgia Department of Human Services, so DHS. And DHS sent out a memo to all the drug screen providers that do these tests for families, that do these tests that are then submitted to our our juvenile courts. And they sent out that memo saying, hey, immediately you guys need to make sure that you're following guidelines. And we talk a little bit about it in the story because there's a lot of jargon and we're not scientists ourselves. But ultimately that memo says you need to make sure you're meeting federal standards when it comes to cutoff levels. And that's basically making sure the math actually rises to a certain threshold. And if it does, that would likely indicate some illicit or illegal drug use. And also in that memo, it reaffirms that there should be an initial screening, but also confirmation. So that means at minimum 2 tests to verify a positive. And on the tail end of those documents, the state said, if you're not meeting these standards, you risk administrative action taken against you. So it'll be interesting to see the results of this memo being sent out. But at this point, we're not sure if there is an audit. We just know there's been communication, essentially the state acknowledging there is some issues, and we want to get everybody on the same page here.
I just want to reiterate for our listeners that that was not an email sent to you. You filed to get a records request of all of those documents, and you found that email. I mean, it's just like, this is journalism at its finest right here, because you are holding, government institutions accountable for not just your reporting, for what they're doing to families here in Georgia. And so out of this, you're takeaway here is that they are doing something, or slowly?
Well, so here's the thing. We should also point out, that memo didn't come from like a tipster or a source. It was in our process of doing those open records requests, and they, based off of the legal requirements of an open records request, they have to return documents that meet what we're requesting. And in response to that, the state was like, hey, we don't have any documentation that explicitly says we are doing an audit, but this is something we recently sent out in reference to those alleged false positive drug screens. And so just based on that back and forth, it seems like there may be some progress. We don't know the extent of the progress. Because if an agency says they're going to do an audit, it is fair to expect that an audit will happen. And because we have not been able to confirm that one has happened, I don't know that we can really say the level in which the progress is happening, but we know this memo has been sent out, and we'll say that that is the beginning, and that's the start. And for families that have been caught in the in-between for these last couple of years, I don't know that they feel that this is enough, but it is a good first step.
Okay, I'm sorry, I could ask questions forever. But another question out of that is, you said 2 tests at least. Are those both hair tests, or does it have to be, like, what if both times it shows positive?
Well, so here's the thing. The state of Georgia DFACS, when they contract these labs to do drug screens, it's a variety of tests. You can do the oral test, so that's saliva, your nail test, urine, which is so common, we know, and hair follicle tests. There are plenty of families that we talk to and say, the state shouldn't even be doing hair follicle tests because, as federal research has shown, it's a little more complicated to read the results of that, and then all of the external potential contaminants from hair dye to environmental factors and all that jazz. But in this memo, the state is saying for a drug screen, regardless of the drug screen, there should be the initial screening and the confirmation screening. There are people that say there should be another level, the specialized test even after that. So at least 2 tests in cases like this, because you're deciding whether a child is separated from their family. So better to be safe than sorry.
Yes, okay, and so with that also, you mentioned a high enough level. Does that mean that certain prescription drugs may show a really, really low level of a methamphetamine, and then maybe if you're actually using drugs, it's going to show a higher level?
So here is the thing. I'm also not a
scientist
Sierra,
on that.
but essentially, that's not exactly it, but it is closely related to that. Basically, the lower the cutoff level, which is a math, it's essentially an equation that a lab would use for whatever drug test they're screening for. So if they're screening for meth, if they're screening for cocaine, if they're screening for amphetamine, whatever they're screening for, there's a certain equation for each screen. And if that equation that you're using results in a lower level, federal research says you're more likely to have a false positive. So they want the level, the formula to equal like the highest level of standard here. And that is more closely aligned with an accurate test. It does sometimes feel like semantics, and the researchers and the experts should be using the right numbers.
Everybody should be using the same, you feel.
It basically boils down to the math and having the right numbers in the equation, and so that blank plus blank equals a true positive. And it seems like people are using different numbers for different equations, and the state is saying, hey, we need to be using federal numbers to meet a federal equation.
Okay, scientist Sierra. My goodness. No, this is amazing reporting, and I know that this is just another chip at the series here, Stolen Sobriety. Thanks for tuning into Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. For more on this story, go to atlantanewsfirst.com and click on the ANF Investigates tab. You can listen to more award-winning investigations wherever you get your podcasts by searching Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First. And tune in Sundays for an hour-long episode of Uncovered, where we highlight some of our biggest investigations that impact our communities.